Let's try and go back to political analyst Professor Dirk Kotze to discuss the State Capture Commission. Prof, I'm hoping your signal will stick now. Perhaps just let's go back to the original question, whether you think the State Capture Commission was worth it or not.
Well, as I said earlier on, I think that first of all the question is, let's say for argument's sake there wasn't the Zondo Commission. Where would we have been then today? We would not have much knowledge about what happened with respect to the Gupta family, what happened with the Treasury, what happened with the different SOEs. And therefore, I would say the public knowledge that exists about the corruption or state capture in South Africa is now at a much more advanced level than if there was no Zondo Commission. At the same time, the Zondo Commission laid the foundation for and did most of the preparatory investigations for the prosecuting authorities as well as the police and the WOPs and the SIUs and others in order to take it further. So they have already done most of the groundwork, the preparatory work for further investigations, and they've already identified who should be investigated further and who should not. So I think a lot of the work that would have taken equally long time for, let's say, the police or the WOPs or the Special Investigative Unit or others, they have now completed. But the advantage of the Zondo Commission is that we saw how they did. So it gives more credibility to the process than simply an investigation behind the scenes by some of these investigative agencies of the state. At the same time, it also sends a very strong message to all of those involved, whether it's the individual persons, whether it is the different parties, whether it is the private sector businesses who were involved, about the fact that it's now in the public domain. It's not, they can't hide from it, they can't deny it, they can't say, but this is imagination. And therefore, I think it is something which has laid the foundation for ultimately for a more systematic approach in order to deal with, first of all, the history of state capture, but also the future, to make sure that it is unlikely or much more difficult for a similar type of situation to recur, and especially to deal more effectively with corruption within the public sector specifically.
But, you know, you mentioned the fact that a lot came out of this commission and almost paved the way for example, the MPA, the ID, and any other authority to properly investigate and look into this. But I want us to speak about how many tried to taint the State Capture Commission and the role that Justice Raymond Zondo played in all of this, and how this impacted the overall perception and understanding of what really happened and how the state was indeed captured.
Yes, I think what we've seen, and with this 4 parts of the report already available, it set out in quite detail, you know, the history of what happened. It set out, for example, the Treasury and what happened in the Treasury with former Finance Minister Nhlanhla, the appointment of Des van Rooyen afterwards, the appointment later on of the ministers who followed, the fact that Kobisi Jonas, that the commission, the evidence of him about the offer that the Guptas were made to him to become a Minister of Finance. So in that sense, there's a historical record now, and which is very difficult to challenge. But at the same time, I think what those who were implicated obviously tried to fight back, to push back against it. We've seen it especially with respect to President Zuma, the fact that he refused the second time to appear before the commission, the court cases that developed as a result of that, the fact that he was ultimately found guilty for contempt of court by the Constitutional Court, and the fact that he issued these public statements as part of this process, highly critical of the judiciary in general, and specifically also of Judge Zondo. So there was a process of trying to question the legitimacy of the judiciary in South Africa, and to undermine the authority, and by doing that, obviously, trying to erode the basis on which actions can be taken against those who are implicated and responsible for state capture. So it wasn't a one-way process. There was a lot of contestation of what the Zondo Commission was busy doing. Some others also tried to challenge the fact that they have been subpoenaed to appear before the Zondo Commission. So I think what we are seeing is that if the Zondo Commission was a commission without teeth, without consequence, then these things most possibly would not have happened. But the fact that this pushback did happen is for me a clear indication that it did have a consequence. It did make an impact on those persons that were mentioned or implicated in the proceedings. So from that point of view alone, I think it became part of also the bigger politics of South Africa. And as we've seen also, it ultimately started to influence the internal politics of the ANC, because one of the factions of the ANC was closely aligned to many of the persons who appeared before the commission. So in a sense, what happened in the commission became, in a sense, duplicated within the ANC also. So it had a definite impact on the internal politics of the ANC and the faction formation that took place there.
Just lastly, Prof, many would look at this commission and many other commissions like the PIC Commission, the SARS Commission, the TRC Commission, and many would say, what's the actual point? Because there's a lot of hype and attention when these reports are released, but then it almost becomes quiet and everything quietens down and nothing is really done. We almost forget about these commissions and we forget about the serious consequences of state capture.
Well, I think on the one hand, the test about the success, the long-term success of the Zondo Commission will be in the form of how many persons will be implicated, will be and brought before court and then also sentenced. But that's one criteria. The other criteria is a more difficult one, and that is what is the public impact, the general impact that the Zondo Commission made on you and me and many other people who were not involved in these processes, but who are part of the South African public and who lost to some extent faith in some of these aspects of government and the fact that there's so widespread corruption. So some aspects, some element of guarantees that we are looking for to say, but this should not happen again. That there should not be a recurrence of state capture or of corruption in general. And I think that recommendations, many of the recommendations that the Commission has made is not about prosecution. It is, for example, in the first part of the report, is about how to change the whole dispensation of procurement by the different state departments, how to professionalize that profession more.
Okay,
also, how to deal with the SOEs.
Yes, I think that's a big one, and of course many South Africans sit and have to deal with how these SOEs have been hollowed out. I wish we had more time, but thank you so much for joining us this evening. That was political analyst Professor Dirk Kotze speaking to us about whether or not the State Capture Commission was actually worth it and the consequences thereof.